So before we get on to our wonderful guest, Siobhan, I just decided that I'm just going to introduce Wilsock, what we do, why I created this event, and what this part is all about. So at Wilsock, we aim to include and increase diversity in terms of BAME, social mobility, disability, and minority ethnic groups, and try and increase their percentage in the legal profession. We aim to do this by a number of events and initiatives that help women build their skills that they already have, be able to show their confidence in the skills they do have, and build and develop skills that they don't have to enable them to pursue their dream career. We also aim to include men in this conversation, as we know that equality is a two-way street, and we can't do this just from the 51% of us that are women. And we know that men also suffer from issues in terms of confidence, mental health, and we think our events both benefit men and women and non-binary and everybody who doesn't identify as a gender. And in terms of why I created this career series, as much as we have gorgeous, wonderful talks on corporate solicitors and barristers in the commercial world, we don't hear enough about the wonderful careers that aren't so advertised in our law school, especially in Birmingham at a Russell Group, and we don't have enough diversity in the different jobs that are out there that are amazing, do much more work on the ground, and are such amazing jobs that we can aspire to be. And everybody who's here obviously knows that this part is about being a lawyer for a charity in the law centre. So that leads me on to this one, which is part 4 of the career series. Welcome to everyone who's stuck with me. And our gorgeous guest today, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, Siobhan, and if you could just give us a tiny summation of what your role is now, and then we'll take you all the way back to law school and your journey up until now.
Hi everyone, thanks very much for asking me to speak tonight. So my name's Siobhan Taylor-Ward. I am now a qualified solicitor at Merseyside Law Centre. I'm only a year qualified, and I practice in housing and social welfare law.
Brilliant, thank you so much. I'm so excited to have you on because we've never had anybody from a law centre, so I think it's brilliant that we get a diverse range of professions. It's so brilliant. Taking you back to when you started, well, before you started law school, when did you first become interested in the law? Was there a specific event that made you interested, or was it the profession in general? When was your interest in law started?
So my dad is he qualified as a solicitor when I was about 8, and he's a law centre solicitor as well. So that's why I really got interested in law. Because he was doing welfare benefits work and personal injury stuff to do with industrial injuries, so things like asbestosis, things that really impacted the communities. So I'd hear his stories about his cases, and that was, you could say that he was changing people's lives and that he really loved what he was doing. The law centres started losing a lot of money. There were cuts to legal aid, there were cuts to funding. So when I was little, we used to go on the marches with my dad for when we were protesting for money to be brought back into the area. So I got quite politically active as well as just understanding the law. And I think that's what made me more interested in this side of law rather than going into corporate.
Yeah, definitely. And then where did you do your law degree?
So I did an English literature degree when I was 21. At John Moores, and then I was a support worker for people with mental health problems for a long time, and basically I just felt like I kept hitting a ceiling. There's only so much you can do without having a professional qualification or having become a professional through training, and so I decided I was going to go back to uni. By that point I had a 6-month-old baby and an 8-year-old daughter, and so I went back to do my GDL again at John Moores, and I did that part-time whilst working as well. So I was working, first year I did the Welfare Benefits Tribunal work, and then during my second year I was really lucky to get a job on the Hillsborough inquests. So when there was the Hillsborough disaster, when the inquest happened, there was a massive legal team built in Liverpool, and I became part of that, representing 22 of the families. Gosh. So the BDL was at John Moores. That's the answer to it.
Gosh, that's amazing. I know that quite a few of our students are actually mature as well. So just on a quick note, how did you find that balancing, obviously it was part-time, but part-time studies and the full job that is being a parent as well?
So, I mean, it was really hard because I was working 4 full days, and then I was in uni for 1 full day. That's how the part-time GDL worked. And then I did the LPC of an evening after that. So I'd worked full time and then did evening for the LPC part time. It was really difficult. But I think you're not really deciding to do that at that age unless you really, really mean it. If you know what I mean, you don't have to do it. you could just decide not to do it. So I feel like once I'd started, I thought I'm really committed to this. I really love it. I really want to do well in it. And so you just push power on through the difficulties. But I mean, obviously it was really difficult. And the financial issue is a massive thing because obviously a lot of people can't afford it. I had to use credit cards, you know, that I'm still paying off now. So it is a massive barrier to people getting in. And probably that's even more difficult once you've got your own family and your own rent and bills and things to pay for. So, you know, there's a lot of issues that are just because of being a mature student, I think, or a carer or parent. But yeah, I got through them, put it that way.
Yeah, definitely. And alongside that then, what kind of extracurriculars did you do? Any studies got involved in? Obviously you said you're a mental, if you can hear the drill, by the way, they've decided to do construction next door. In terms of being a mental health support worker as well, what kind of skills did you gain from that? And what opened your eyes into like what issues that were going on in society?
I don't know. I mean, I was a kid in the 80s. So I know what was happening in the 80s and 90s. I was in a little primary school on a council estate. So I already knew that people were struggling. You know, we weren't well off or anything. My dad's a law centre lawyer, not like a big hotshot lawyer or whatever. So I think I always grew up knowing about these issues to a certain extent. And then obviously the things my dad would tell me about the work he was doing and being able to hear that. And then moving into mental health work, I think that was really, really useful for me as a law centre worker, because I think often in social welfare law, people come to you because it's like the end of the road and they're usually the most vulnerable people that have got nowhere else to turn. So often mental health issues are a part of that, or learning difficulties, or just life issues crushing down on them and stress. So having been able to learn how to deal with people and speak to people calmly and nicely and kindly, I think is really, really useful for this side of the profession. Definitely, probably all sides of the profession, it would help being a good communicator, because often clients don't have to deal, our clients, they don't have to deal with professionals hardly ever. It's only like the doctor maybe. So that can just be scary on its own, thinking about seeing a solicitor and picturing them as, you know, they're portrayed as a white man in a suit. I think just sometimes just being a nice woman who's going to speak to you like nicely and calmly and seem like a normal person, speak like you, that kind of thing, it's quite nice for them to then feel more comfortable around you. So I think, yeah, just general life experience, but then definitely that kind of work really, really does help with this side. And it also means you're aware of like welfare benefits issues that people with disabilities face, and, you know, housing, accommodation issues that they can face, so that you've got that awareness already.
Yeah, that makes me sense. It's interesting as well. I sometimes you forget that people who come to solicitors don't deal with professionals all the time. Obviously, we deal with other law students. We hopefully get training contracts and work with solicitors, but that's not a normal environment. People who have these issues don't normally deal with them. That's so interesting. What kind of, in terms of like pro bono and extracurriculars at uni that students get involved in, what kind of things would you recommend? Obviously, it's great to have, as you say, being on the ground and seeing the welfare issues in person. What kind of things would you recommend to students hoping to get involved in pro bono and mental health issues and social welfare issues as well?
Well, I think if you're interested in that side of the law, then it's really important to become a member of Young Legal Aid Lawyers, because I think that's one of the best resources that I've had throughout my whole career. Once we get back to face, it's just brilliant for like meeting other people that are in similar situations, and then you've always got somebody that you can call on if you need to find I don't know, you know somebody who's all the different kinds of lawyers and you've got kinds of contacts, and that's nice because if you're going into it as a person that doesn't have a lot of legal contacts, then that's a good way of building those, because you are already like a step behind everybody else, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
So they put on a lot of really good events with amazing speakers on different subjects, and that gives you a really good insight. But then there's things as well, like preparing responses to consultations from the government, or things like that that give you a chance to have a go at drafting and research work, policy work, which is really good for if you did want to work in a law centre or a charity or somewhere that's got a bit of an activist side to it. It's really good to get that experience in, to show that you've got some policy knowledge and policy experience. It's a bit like with corporate, where you've got to have the business knowledge and you understand the market and whatever. That's our side of it. That's what you need to understand, is the policy behind it and the things that we could do to change that. So I think that's really important. But also volunteering in your local CAB or your local law centre or places like that, especially law students, that we like to have you volunteering with us, because you already have a bit of an idea of what's going on, so it's not so difficult to train you up ready to see clients. But also we're very keenly aware that there's a crisis at the moment in legal aid and social welfare law. There aren't enough of us, the funding's really bad. We're not going out to law fairs and things because we can't pay for the tables, so students, as you said, you just don't know about us. So even people who may well have been keen to do that work just doesn't even understand it's an option. So I think that's really important, that we want to be able to show students what that side of the profession is like. So that definitely is a good thing to do if you can. And also, I think law clinics at the universities. Have you got one at Birmingham? I don't know.
We have the Freedom Law Clinic, so they go out into the public, and I'm not sure if I think that's actually I think that's nationwide, and we help with any sort of legal issues. I think you can kind of have a preference in criminal law or employment or immigration, and we have so many pro bono initiatives that are also immigration specific. I'm part of the Women AIDS one as well.
Exactly that. I was involved in the law clinic at John Moores University. The first year it was set up was 2014, I think it was. So I was on the steering group of students that were involved in setting that up, and now it's flying. It's got a couple of solicitors working there doing really good work. And that was the thing that I really liked about the law clinic, was doing sides of law that I might not have got experience of, so family and employment, that are more difficult to get a volunteer placement for, or paid work without experience. So that, yeah, I'd recommend those three things if you're looking at this side of the profession.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. I noticed you, because I know what it is, but I'm aware some people might not. Could you explain a tiny little bit of what Young Legal Aid Lawyers is? Because I think it actually really, loads of people would want to join that if they knew a bit more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a nationwide campaign and support group for junior legal aid lawyers, anybody who's up to 10 years qualified, and students and people that aren't even students yet but would really like to become lawyers, and SILEX, everything, the whole range of people up to 10 years qualified. We've got a big website with loads of resources. We've got a really good jobs page, which is excellent because it does volunteer stuff as well as paid stuff, so that's worth keeping an eye on. And we have really, really good events, as I was saying before. We've got them online at the moment, and so that's brilliant, because we used to obviously have them face to face, and we weren't, I don't know why, considering we're meant to be young lawyers, but we weren't even recording them at that time. So if it was a London event, you just couldn't see it if you weren't in London, whereas now we're still holding them in the local areas, but everybody in the whole country can watch. So it's really brilliant. We do once a year we have a massive conference with Public Law Project, who are an organisation in London, that's over a weekend, and that has really big keynote speakers, amazingly exciting events. But as I say, a lot of the work is policy campaigning work. So our main campaign aims are to do with social mobility into the profession, protecting junior lawyers within the profession, and improving the legal aid system, basically. So after the cuts in 2012, which I'm sure you have all learned about, the situation is dire. And so one of our main things is that if we don't improve the legal aid system, it's just going to die off completely, because nobody can survive on the wages when you're a trainee or a paralegal. So that's something that we focus on a lot. We do a lot of work with like engaging with government consultations. We're on different, I like deal with the what's it called, solicitors qualifying exam, SQE. So I go to all the reference group meetings with the SRA when that was getting put through. We had a lot of complaints about that, but yeah, we didn't really we tried to influence things, you see. So that's what I mean. It's like we know what our aims are, and we then campaign on those aims, and we'll go and speak to whoever to try and get our point across. And it's a committee, how many? I think there's about 20 of us on the committee now, and then there's 3 co-chairs, but we've got about 4,000 members across the country, and a lot of the stuff we like put out to members to try and get you involved. Basically, I'll give you opportunities for writing, maybe like note taking, and then it'll be put on our website, or if something interesting happens relevant to our work, getting you to write an article that'll go on the website, you know, just things to give our members bits of experience that they just might not have access to any other time. So yeah, that's what YLL is, and I really encourage anybody who's got any interest at all in legal aid to get involved in that. Definitely.
I think that's completely brilliant, because there's so many different aspects you can get involved in. So obviously the writing, if you're really good at that, and the in-person stuff, hopefully at some point, client communication, and yeah, I think that's absolutely brilliant. I think so many people would benefit from that. So I read, when I did all my research and I read your LinkedIn, I saw that you worked at a law firm after your law degree. Can you tell us a bit about what your application to law firms, because I know that's quite a big time at the moment for people doing applications?
It's a bit weird. So the law firm job was the Hillsborough inquest job that I mentioned before. So it was a bit of a different application to, you know, the big, well, it was definitely competitive, but it wasn't the same thing as being on this chain of you've got to get your application in now and you go and be a paralegal and then you be a trainee. And it was a bit like, it was different because, so I still had to do like the full application process, but the interviews were more, it was just focused on Hillsborough, and it wasn't about trying to get that position to then become a trainee. It was about being involved in this particular project. So it was a really strange thing because we were within the firm, but we were basically, there was 27 of us in this, on this one case for 4 years. So it's just a really different experience to most experiences. Yeah, but once I was in the firm, then obviously that's good because they've got different areas of law. And once, you know, I was able to then move within the same firm into asylum law when the inquest finished. So that is definitely a good thing about private practice or high street firms, is there's more opportunity for like crossing over to different areas. Whereas obviously in the law centre, or the ones I've worked in, they're smaller, and you know, you're just in your job, and that's probably the only job that there is there. So
yeah, definitely. I think that's fascinating though, because we only, anytime somebody ever comes and gives us a talk, we only kind of get an insight into commercial work, litigation, M&A, corporate, acquisitions, mergers, and all that sort of stuff, which is really interesting, of course. But I think guests would really love to know, like, obviously it's confidential, but anything you can tell us about the work you did for the Hillsborough disaster, because obviously we're all completely aware of what that was, and it must have been so fascinating but heartbreaking to work on at the same time.
Yeah, so just briefly, the Hillsborough disaster was in 1989 when 96 people died at a crush that happened at the stadium in Sheffield, the Hillsborough Stadium. And the match was, basically it was Liverpool fans that died, the majority of them from Liverpool. And it's basically been part of my life for my whole life, and that's what it's like when you're from here, because everybody knows about it, and we had no justice for all that time. So it was something that was talked about a lot, And obviously there were a lot of cases that went on where they tried to have a private prosecution. There was an inquiry that Tony Blair put in, but wasn't really a proper inquiry. So throughout my life, this was a thread running through it. You always knew it was there. And basically the fans at the time, had been blamed for the crush. There was a lot of press from the Sun newspaper blaming the fans, saying they were drunk and they were rioting. And they denied that and vociferously denied it. And there was a belief that it was police actions, that they hadn't behaved properly, and that had led to the crush. And so for years and years and years, the families of the deceased people fought for a proper inquiry and a proper inquest. And we were granted the inquest. So my boss at the firm I worked at, Elkin Abrahamson, had been working with the families pro bono for years, doing a lot of work for them pro bono. So it just shows you what amazing things pro bono work can do. And he led our team on the inquiry. So 22 of the deceased people's families that we represented. And basically the government were ordered to release all of the evidence that had ever been gathered regarding the disaster. So we had, I can't remember now, but it was hundreds of thousands of pages of documents. I used to know the number, but I can't remember. And hours of footage of the CCTV footage. So we had teams of different people that were looking at different aspects of what had happened. So my team was events of the day. So we basically had to look at everybody's witness statements about what had happened from when they'd left the house until basically the point when the ambulance arrived. So the crush had happened, but the ambulance had then arrived, and then it turned into another team who dealt with the response basically. And there was other teams that were looking at how the police had planned for it or how the FA had picked that ground. So every little bit was picked apart. It was a lot of document review, and it was mainly computer based, just reviewing. But also alongside that, we put out loads of calls for people to come forward to give evidence, and hundreds of people that had never spoken before came forward and gave witness statements to us. So I think honestly that has been like some of the hardest times of my career, was dealing with the survivors who had never ever spoken about what had happened. Like, how many people were literally saying, I've never told anybody ever about that day, I've never spoken about it ever before, because it was just utterly traumatic. So one of the men had felt that he'd stood on somebody's head as he'd had to try and get out of the pen that he was trapped in, and never ever could forgive himself because he felt like he trod on someone to get to save himself. And it's just been a really terrible trauma for our city that has just gone on and on and on. And the fact that there was no justice was the worst part of it. And so basically we then prepared all the evidence for the inquest. Our barristers did amazing work. We'd attend the inquests on set days we had each to go and sit with the families to just be supportive of them. Because you just can't imagine listening to that, can you, about your children or your brother or your dad. And then we were there on the day that we got the verdict, where we got a full house and the fans were exonerated, and the police were, squarely blamed. And David Duckenfield, the commander on the day, he was also found to be an unlawful killing. So that there's never going to be a day like that ever again. It was amazing. And then going back to the city, and there was just tens of thousands of people in St George's Plaza waiting for the families to all come out, and the legal team. Yeah, it was amazing. And because it had gone on for so long and it was just one case, we were such a tight-knit team. It's just this weird experience that, you're never really going to get that again. And it's not really what the law's like, but it's definitely set me up so well with the document review and having to be really quick at doing that, but also be dead sensitive with the clients. And yeah, it was a really good job. Yeah, I was lucky.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think that, I think we can all resonate with that, or have stories or know somebody, or just as a nation, it's just something we'll all remember. But thank you so much for sharing your really impactful work during that. I think that's, yeah, I think it's so interesting. We never hear anything like that. I think we'll all take something away from that. I think that's so completely useful. And then in terms of that incredible work, and then you said you went on to do a seat in asylum and worked in that department. What kind of work did you do after that, after the Hillsborough work, and then in between that and the law clinic? What kind of tasks did you do on a day-to-day basis? What kind of things did you do in the law solicitor firm?
So I was a senior caseworker in asylum, and basically I was then handling my own cases, and obviously a number of cases rather than just one massive case. So just what I did on a day, I'd be doing, obviously you've got to use like your case management system. You've got to be really good at keeping a record of your time. It's with legal aid, you get paid a fixed fee. So in asylum, it was about £413 you'd get paid fixed fee. And then if you went over 15 hours, you'd then get paid every hour that you worked. But if you didn't, so that's about 8 hours, 413 at legal aid rates. So that means that you've got like a big chunk of hours that you're not getting paid for. It's a really weird system, but obviously you've got to record every minute just in case you can get up to the escape fee and get paid for every minute that you work. So then a lot of the work was asylum cases. I did do a bit of like family reunion. I did some immigration applications, but my main focus was trafficking and asylum. So, I mean, again, that was very much dealing with a lot of traumatized people in really horrible situations. Yeah. I think my favourite part of that was dealing with the minors, like the under 18s. They were always, it was just nice to get to know them. It was always a nice session when you got to do their witness statements, because they, you know, it was just nice. I liked working with young people, and you'd go with them to their interviews at the Home Office, and you weren't allowed to like speak on their behalf or anything, but you'd be taking notes, and you were allowed to stop it if you thought anything was being said incorrectly by the, like if something weird came out that you hadn't heard before, or if you felt the Home Office were like badgering them or being mean to them or whatever, you could say we need a break. So you were there to protect them basically, which was nice because the Home Office can be appalling to people, and so it was good to be able to be sat there and prevent that. A lot of witness statements in asylum, so it's just crazy, like hours and hours and hours of doing witness statements, because obviously as well often you need an interpreter, so it's not just speaking, it's like having to then wait for them to interpret and then you write it down, and but it's a heavy load, because they're telling you that if they go back to their country they're going to get killed or really badly harmed, so you really want them not to have to go back to their country. So that's heavy. I've only ever had one client that was deported, and that was just, I can't even tell you, he phoned me from Iraq to tell me he'd been deported and how could he get his passport back, because he can't get back into his hometown without his passport because you have to have ID. And I'm just like, oh my God. And because the system's so appalling that he didn't even get the chance to tell his solicitor that he was going to be deported, and just was put on a plane and sent back to Iraq, and it had to be Iraq. Of what a horrible place to be returned to. Yeah, and that was horrible, and it felt terrible. So I never wanted that to happen again, but then you can't, it's hard, you've got to learn not to blame yourself for it, because you can only do what the law allows you to do. So that's something, I think it's like being a surgeon or whatever, you've got to know that you didn't kill that person just because they died in your operation. You've got to try and look at it like that. But I also think a lot of people that do the kind of work I do it because they are sensitive and do feel that way. So I think you've got to find that balance, because you don't want to be cold and hard, because that's not going to work with our client group. But also you've got to protect yourself. Like you wouldn't be able to get up every day, would you, if you took every part of it onto your own shoulders?
Yeah, definitely.
That was really good work. Doing the witness statements is just such a skill. it's such a skill to learn. I think that's so asylum was really good for that, and also preparing bundles for court and really proper legal tasks that have like stood me in good stead for my whole career.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And building on that, how did you switch off? So how did you come away from these really emotional days and having been invested? How did you switch off on a day-to-day basis, mentally, for your own mental well-being? Of course, you're a mental health support worker, but how did you take time to separate the work from your social life and home life and your children, of course?
I don't know. It's a really hard question, because I think well-being is now more of a thing that people talk about. But like, I've only been in practice for like 7 years, but it's definitely the last 2 or 3 years it's become more of a thing that people realise is a thing and needs to be dealt with. So because of when you work, especially in private practice, it's about billing. So you're called a fee earner. That's what you're really there for. You're meant to be billing, even when it's legal aid. They've got to stay open, and so it's things like your target is that you've got to bill 4 times your salary, and so that puts pressure on you for like, if you need more money, if you're not earning enough, then you've got to try and do that to get your salary increase. But it also means that it's not about having like a mental health day. It's about just getting on with it because you need to do your work. But on top of that, a lot of the areas, because of the funding being so poor, then they're understaffed. So because there's a massive need for social welfare law, it's just crazy that, it's way outstripping the provision of services. So you do have a too heavy caseload, and that it's really, really difficult. I think some of the things that help me, the main thing I think is just literally experience and just getting better at understanding and accepting that you can only do as much as you can do, and that's the end of it. You cannot save the whole world all by yourself. You can just do your best at what you can do in your little area, and that's it. Practically though, I think things like I really got into yoga. I absolutely love yoga, and I was using yoga a lot during lockdown to just calm me down for 5 minutes, because things were just so crazy, weren't they? We didn't know what was happening, and the law was changing all the time, things like that. Clients were all over the place, so yoga did help. I can't remember what it's called. Claiming Spaces. Claiming Spaces is a really good organisation specifically for lawyers, and most people that go are social welfare or legal aid lawyers. And they used to just hold in-person meetings in London, but then again, because of lockdown, they've started doing Zoom, and it's really, really nice. It's just once a month. You have an hour and a half session, and it's all confidential, and you just offload what you need to offload. And because everybody's in the same situation, it's lovely. It just gets it off your chest, and you just feel better. And I think one of the main things is having at least one colleague that you get on with well enough to be able to talk about it, because it's difficult to talk to your family or your friends if they're not lawyers as well, because you've got to then explain the whole situation and the law and the issue and why has this happened before you feel they understand what your problem is, if you know what I mean. So I think getting a good little network of friends who are also in similar types of work is quite important.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much for that. So then when you moved on from the law firm, how did you then get into the law centre that you now work at? Because I think that's really fascinating.
So, I always wanted to work in a law centre, but as I say, jobs in law centres are really limited because of the funding. So the Legal Education Foundation is a charity and grant funding body. And they set up, I don't know how many years now, maybe about 5 years ago, something called the Justice First Fellowship. And what they do is they pay for law centres to be able to fund a trainee solicitor. at their law centre. Well, not just law centres, other organisations that do social welfare law and can't afford to pay trainees themselves. So yeah, it's brilliant. So there's about 18, 19 opportunities every year. It's the same as like trying to get, well, it's not. Okay, so you've got to apply when you finished your LPC. So I think it's September, October are the applications, and then interviews November, then you start in the January. So I had a really annoying situation when I was going into the asylum department. I had to qualify. You've got to get a special accreditation to be able to do immigration work. You can't just be trained. You've got to have this specific accreditation because it's registered work under the SRA. So I had to go for an exam, and the only place you can go is in London for a 4-hour exam. And it was on the same day as my LPC housing exam. And neither organisation would do anything to help me. I couldn't get them to change this. I was writing to everybody begging for it. So in the end, John Moores let me defer the exam. So I didn't like lose my grade or anything. I just had to defer it and sit it in summer. But that meant that I didn't get my grades on time for the September slot for applying for the Justice First Fellowships just after my LPC. So because it meant that I graduated late. And so, have I frozen? Am I still? Can you hear me? Because everything's gone frozen.
Lord help Richard Branson when he gets my.
I didn't know if anyone could hear me because it was all flashing.
I'm so sorry about that. Oh, no, that was just me. That's just my Wi-Fi. It's just Virgin Media, right? Sorry about that. The last thing I heard, and I don't know about the rest of our guests, the last thing I heard was you telling us that they gave, because you had to have special accreditation for immigration, it was on the same day as your LPC.
So they let me defer me exam so that I could sit it in the summer sit-ins, but that meant that I didn't graduate in time for the Justice First Fellowship. And it was 2 days after the deadline and they wouldn't let me apply. I had a really unlucky year that year. But anyway, so that meant that I'd graduated for just over a year by the time I applied for the Justice First Fellowship. And it was actually in Manchester, in Greater Manchester Law Centre. So the fellowship's really good because it's not just the training contract, you also get a lot of extra training. We go down to London twice a year for conferences and they put on extra things about like campaigning or media contacts or things like that, stuff that you're probably going to need if you're doing the policy work that we do at law centres. So that's really, really good. And I think especially for people in like outside of London to get to go and see what it's like down there, just get a bit of experience and you meet so many amazing people. And we have a conference dinner every February, so all the other graduates that have already finished and qualified come back and they're always like, they've done so well and they're just amazing and dead inspiring, and so that's really, really nice. I got my graduation from my JFF was given to me by Baroness Hale, Lady Hale, which was just like the most exciting thing that's ever happened. I was like fangirling all over. Yeah, that was amazing. And we get to go, so I don't know what's going to happen with coronavirus, but the year after you've graduated, so I graduated from the fellowship in January just this year. So next February, we're supposed to go to New York and you go and work with the Innocence Project for a week. So it's just like all these amazing experiences. And it's so good because it really was impossible for law centres to provide training contracts because of the cost of training and overheads when a trainee is not supposed to be really billing to cover their fees in that position. So I think in a way they have really saved like the future of law centres at the moment. But I think anyone who's interested in social welfare law should be looking at the Justice First Fellowship. That's probably the best way you're going to get a training contract in that area. Is it frozen again?
Yeah, here we are. So we did have a question. Sorry, that's really irritating. So we did have a question about immigration. Sorry, Louisa. What's that? By the way, everybody, Louisa is my event assistant. She's absolutely amazing, and she's my host, I believe. So if I do drop out, please just continue on without me. My ship will sink. Everybody else sail. Louisa, what was that question about immigration for Siobhan?
Hi everyone. So Natasha asked about the difference between immigration law and at a private firm. So she's done some experience already at a law centre nearby, and she just asked, how would you say working on immigration law at a law centre compares to working in a private firm?
So the main difference is to do with how your billing targets work. So because law centres aren't profit making, you're not really supposed to be billing triple times your wage. So you really should be getting probably about double, so that you're covering all your overheads. And so straight away what that means is that when you're dealing with a trafficking or a mental health case, or one of the cases that are really complex, you can put the time into it that you need. Where basically when I was doing asylum work in a private firm, I was having to stay till 8-9 o'clock every night just to tick things over, because you've got to keep your caseload so high to be able to bill enough. And in order to then do the work properly, you can't just go home at 5-6 o'clock, you've got to stay there. And I mean, that's not sustainable, and it's especially not sustainable when you're not earning shed loads of money for it. So maybe if you're going to be doing mergers and acquisitions and you stay up 24 hours and then you get loads and loads of money for it, well, maybe you're going to be able to work part-time or retire early. That's not going to happen when you're only on, 25,000-26,000 pounds. So I think the best difference is that you can focus on the legal issues and give your client the best within the law centre, just because that pressure's off a little bit from billing. And that's not to say that they're not amazing lawyers and they don't care about the clients at private practice at all. It's just that the way things are paid for and funded is different, because we're not trying to make a profit at all. We're just trying to stay surviving, basically. And I think that just being able to give that time is really important to your learning as a lawyer as well, your improvement as a lawyer, because these issues are really complex and you've got to just deal with things so quickly. So being able to maybe have a caseload of 5 really complex cases rather than 10 like iffy cases, but you haven't got time because you're rushing on everything, it's a nicer way to work. Although it's still definitely pressured, there's still definitely not always much capacity. Yeah, but I think the other thing that's different is that you're more involved or more likely to be involved with campaigning to change things for everybody. So like strategic litigation, where you work with other law centres to find clients that fit the mould to be able to change laws through judicial review, for instance, or just literally speaking out politically on your Twitter feed, because we're a bit more able to do that because we're saying, well, we believe in free access to justice and this is how we're presenting ourselves, so it's a bit easier. And a lot of law centres also have maybe a small campaigns team who are doing things like that, writing about policy changes and will get involved in campaigns. So I think that's quite nice, because sometimes you just feel like you're just chipping away at tiny problems every day and the big picture is just so it is nice to feel like you've changed something that might affect a large number of people.
Definitely, thank you so much. Is everybody able to hear me? Yeah, brilliant. So that's quite interesting. Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because we're never really told anything about the difference between law centres and firms, and we never get enough people to come and talk in. I think that's really fascinating. Louisa, did we get another wee question through there?
Yeah, we've got another question.
Brilliant, thank you.
Zainab was wondering, what advice would you give to law students who are interested in helping people and social justice on how to develop their experience?
Yeah, I think what I said earlier about trying to volunteer is the main thing. And I think if you can't straight away get a volunteer role in a law centre or CAB, anything within food banks or outreach organisations within the community, any of that is going to help you, because it's going to start making you aware of what the issues are. So if you want to work in Liverpool, for instance, go and help at a food bank in Liverpool, because you're going to start to understand what's going on in Liverpool, what's going on with the people that you want to help. So I think that's really good then to build on, for you to be able to apply for voluntary legal roles, because you're going to be able to show a picture of caring about people and caring about the issues, and putting time in to try and get that experience. Because obviously being at a food bank, for instance, maybe you're just handing out food, but sometimes somebody needs to ask you something and you've got to find out how to signpost them somewhere. You've got to know how to speak calmly and respectfully to them when they're in this vulnerable position. Really good skills that you can then talk up in your CV when you're trying to get the next volunteer opportunity. So I think definitely the like, what's the word, like the goal is to try and get law centre CAB type work. But before that, there's so many other things within the community that you can do just to see what's going on and see if you like it. You might not really like it, or you might absolutely love it, and then that'll push you on forward.
That's so interesting. Thank you so much. I think that's quite interesting about like being able to know when you're interested in something as well, because it's all great me going, oh, Brit, I really want to do family law. But for me personally, when I went to then volunteer to support through court and I help people with family appeals and non-molestation orders and things like that, I thought, oh, that's not really for me. But I think gaining that experience in the first place is so interesting. And obviously, you know, you have a certain inclination towards it anyway. I think that's really interesting. Oh. My screen's paused. I don't know if anybody can hear that. Yeah, right, my screen paused. Did anybody hear that? Oh, thanks, Lynette. I'm back. That's amazing. Also, I actually wanted to ask a question on the back of that. I think it's really brilliant to get involved with charities, to get involved in law centres and everything you said. I just wondered if you had any tips for people who don't have outright confidence, who aren't applying for every position they can at the time when they can apply for it. Do you have any tips for people who aren't so confident knowing what they want to do, or confidence in terms of being able to speak to people, do all the interviews to work at these volunteering positions?
Really, it's difficult. I think one thing, as I said before, is that's nice with YLAL is that you young legal aid lawyers, we call it YLAL. It's good that you're able to go in and be known that you're a junior lawyer, so nobody is expecting you to be walking in there with loads of knowledge and they're brave and confident, and you know everybody that's there is at some level junior in the profession. a lot of them are students as well. And you can just go, once we're back face to face, or now you can go on the Zoom, you can go to a meeting and just sit there silently and soak it all up. You don't have to say anything, you don't have to push yourself forward. It's a nice way to just start learning about what's going on and what the different areas of law within legal aid and social welfare are, without having to, you know, really say anything or do anything. As well, there's the opportunities with writing, which is something that if you're not really keen on speaking out, that's a good way to get involved and have something for your CV. And that's another thing with, as I say, some law centres, Greater Manchester's got a really good campaigns team that are all volunteers. So I don't know what your law centre has like that, but there will be some organisations where it's about tweeting or it's about writing articles or researching for policy. It's not about having to go out there and meet people. But what that will do is you will be speaking to somebody that's from the law centre. You will start to get used to talking to people in the profession and start to get used to what's going on in the profession, because it is a weird world, and if you're not used to it, it is strange. And that's why people who have got like a parent in a corporate firm and then they've been brought up in a corporate firm are going to feel more comfortable than somebody that's never been near a corporate firm before. And that's why things like WILAL can help with social mobility, because it means that it's a way in, that people that haven't got another way in, there's your way. You go and you work and you'll find somebody there that seems approachable and nice enough for you to be able to ask questions. But we've also got like our info inbox that you can, if you've got a question, you can ask there. And a really good thing is the mentoring scheme. So I've got a mentor at the moment who has no idea what area he wants to do. He's just starting his LPC. He knows he wants to do some kinds of legal aid work, or he thinks he knows, but he doesn't really know what area. And so what we've been doing is just looking through his background, looking through what experience he's got up to now, having a look at what opportunities are out there at the moment that you might want to go of. So you can sign up through WILAL for your own mentor, and they can help you talk through this. So you might have email conversations, or you can have Zoom, or you can just have a phone call, whatever you feel most comfortable with. But somebody, it will be matched up with you. They will have a chat with you and see what it is that, you know, where you want to go and what you want to expand on maybe. And I think that's a really good way in as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. I think that's really key, that you start off with running positions if you're not so confident, and then I think you do build it up through the connections you have at university and the charities. Maybe it's like you volunteer one day a week and then you move on to a different project, it's more people focused. But yeah, I think that's so good that it's just like a building process as well. Thank you so much for that. And then if nobody else has got any other questions, obviously we're the Women in Law Society. I wondered, because we're not in the corporate commercial, you know, 70% male partners role and world, I wondered if you have experienced or seen any barriers for women, that could be being a solicitor or access to justice for women who come to you and your law centre for help, or if there's barriers that you thought you might face but you actually didn't. Is there anything like that?
It's a bit of a weird one for legal aid, because as you say, it's not quite the same with the gender split, but we still have a problem with partners being mostly male and white in our sector as well. It's interesting because sometimes I think it's similar to being a teacher. You get more women being a teacher and you get more women being a nurse. It's like social welfare or legal aid work is seen more as the woman's side of the profession. So it is very much female heavy. And it's great for me because I want to be on this side of the law, but I also do think that it's definitely got something to, I can't say definitely, but I think from my experience and what I've picked up is to do with men being more willing to push themselves forward to go and do a high paying job because they think that they're worth it, whereas women have a lot of confidence issues, or not even, you might come across confident, but you think that you're probably not going to get it anyway, so I'll just do that job instead. So, or I'm not worth £50,000. So, because we do have a lot of issues of gender pay gap, where it's a bit often because your wages are like based on billing, it's not as if you just go on different what's the word, like levels, and you all get paid the same. So it's a bit of a weird one to know what the pay gap has come from, but there's definitely been where trainees have been paid differently, and it turns out men have been paid more. That's a problem, because trainees, it's not about what you bill, and you're just a trainee. You should just be getting paid what you're getting paid. And that's within like high street, private practice, legal aid firms. So there is definitely still problems with that. And a lot of that is to do with the men going in and saying, I want a pay rise and I'm worth a pay rise, and the women feeling much less able to say those things. And the bosses just allow that to happen, because obviously it saves them money if they don't give the pay rise. So it's still definitely an issue. And I do think there's a drop off, because the pay isn't massive like it is in the commercial sector. There's not very good maternity packages. A lot of the firms don't have anything. It's just the statutory maternity, which is insane when you think about how much you've spent to get qualified, and the years you put in, and the special skills that you've got that they should want to support to bring you back. Like it does. I've seen people feel expendable because of that, because it's like, we don't want to pay you enough to make you think that you want to come back at the end. We don't want to put that time into you, even though you've put so much time and effort into being a good lawyer for them. So I think that's one of the things that I've seen as be a big issue, is that firstly, women put off having children for ages because they're trying to get the pay up to be able to cover if they have to go off on that maternity leave. Secondly, just deciding they're not going to do it at all. And thirdly, it just happens that then they can't have children because they've waited so long because of how the career is. It's partly to do with the pay and the lack of maternity, but also because it is really hard being a mum and being a solicitor. Like it's a really hard job. So I think that's definitely something that is less heavy on the men, because they're not the ones having to worry about the maternity pay still. Unfortunately, it's not equal. I think they're probably the main things. But I mean, there's been like plenty of horrible incidents with like where I've had clients that think I'm an idiot and I'm a stupid little blonde girl, and like ask for the manager, and you're just like, what the hell? I had one saying, I'm not having you, I'm only going to be represented by a man. And my boss was like, well, you're not going to be represented by us at all then, if you leave. Or and he calmed down, and I did represent and win for him. But also things like interpreters, or an interpreter and a clerk, I'm thinking of specifically, being like, hello beautiful, when you like meet them at court and you're introduced, as if they'd say that to a male lawyer, things that you just think, that just remind you that it's not all okay yet. There's still some work to be done.
Yeah, God, that's so true. And do you have any, I know we've gone over, but I'm gonna do it. I've got 2 minutes. Do you have any tips for women to build up the confidence to take that space and to show up their high worth, and to not, they should already have that respect, of course, to demand that respect that they deserve in the solicitor role? Do you have any final like quick fire tips for us as we all enter this future generation role?
I mean, that's like so tough. I don't know what the quick fire answers are. I just think that you have to, I don't know, just believe in yourself. It sounds so cheesy, but it's honestly, you are worth as much as anybody else. You are able to be just as good a lawyer as anybody else. Once you prove to yourself how good you are, then accept that as being true and put it out there to tell everybody else. And it is really difficult to be like brash and boasty. I'm not that type of person at all. So doing things like this, it's nice because I can just have a little chat with you. It's nice because I know that I'm helping people that are coming on in the profession, and that's what I really want to do. But there's ways to be confident and to be successful that don't mean that you have to tread on people's heads and be mean and nasty
Yeah.
and boastful, or what, do you know what I mean? There's a difference. And I think that's one of the things that the traditional female roles we can bring to the profession, is that softer side of things, that we don't all have to become men to succeed. We can be amazing women and succeed.
That's amazing. That I knew that was worth asking that extra question. Just want to say thank you so much to you being our wonderful guests, and I do apologize for my Wi-Fi issues, but of course they're fine as soon as we are wrapping up the event. But thank you so much. Is there anywhere people can find you to read about extra information about you or follow you on social media or anywhere?
I'm on Twitter, and I think it's Siobhan Taylor Broad. I don't know.
Yeah, well, we'll tag you anyway when we post about the event afterwards.
Siobhan T. Broad, I am.
Will do.
Will you send out the links to Wild to the people when you send the video and stuff after?
Of course, absolutely. Of course.
Okay, so I'll send you it by email and you can share it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Will do. That's a brilliant initiative. I think we should all get involved. Thank you so much to you, Siobhan. Thank you. Have a nice evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much.